You're all over the place. I love listening to you. Every time you're on stage, I just sit there with my mouth open and my pen going crazy. So welcome, both of you. We're going to talk about the demise. Well, maybe not the demise, but the demise of Black Friday. And so I thought we'd start by just talking a little bit about where the term Black Friday came from. And then we'll get into a little bit about what's been going on. And then we'll lastly end with what is the future of Black Friday. So I don't know if a lot of people know this, but back in 1869, Black Friday was actually used to describe the crash of the US gold market. So there were some Wall Street financiers that actually bought up a bunch of gold in hopes to driving up the gold price. Their scheme was found out, and Black Friday was the day that a lot of people actually lost a lot of money. So fast forward to 1950, Black Friday then became to mean, in the city of Philadelphia, was Friday before the Army-Navy game on Saturday. A lot of shoppers would go and shop in Philadelphia, and it was just crazy. And so the police labeled that as Black Friday. So it wasn't really until the 1980s that the term was widely used to know it as we know it today. And I have to say that I kind of missed the camaraderie when I was in the industry, getting up at 4 a.m., getting to the store at 5 a.m. We all were there together, ready to open the doors at 6 a.m. For those doorbusters. So let's start with Mark. Tell us a little bit about your memories of Black Friday.
Well, in retail speak, it was allegedly the day when most retailers who had been unprofitable to date became profitable because of the volume they did on that day after Thanksgiving. That probably wasn't ever entirely true. It might be that retailers started to become profitable in the fourth quarter. But at the end of the day, Black Friday, from a retail perspective, gold bullion notwithstanding, was the mother of all promotions. It was probably, I don't know who actually created it at retail in a big way, but it probably was Walmart. And it was an extraordinarily important, complicated, and powerful way to drive an early morning door the day after the holiday to capture an enormous crowd of customers who would take advantage of very well crafted, very well designed doorbusters, which had been in many cases sourced and negotiated over the course of a year, logistically placed in stores in appropriate quantities. And the thinking was, if you drove the early morning door, it started out at 8 a.m. and it migrated backwards. We'll talk about that. You would capture a customer who would not only shop for these specials, but would then fill the trunk of their car with what they had collected and then come back into the store, since they weren't about to go drive somewhere else and try to find a parking place, and begin their holiday shopping. And your store would be set up to give them a glimpse of what the next 2 weeks would offer them. It was a very, very complicated ballet that required a lot of forethought. First and foremost, you had to have some really great items. They had to be really well priced. If you had your act together, you really got the market to pay for most of the promotion, if not all of it. And then logistically, especially if you were running a large organization, you had to be ready for the crowds, which was easier said than done. So I'll stop right there, but to say that it was the mother of all promotions. It still exists, but as a shadow of what it once was. It's become purloined. It's gone the way of the ubiquitous one-day sale as a prime motivator, even though it invariably still does a lot of business for a lot of people.
Lisa, what are your thoughts?
So my thoughts vary, and I'll almost break it down in stages. So as a teen, I worked in retail, of course, because I was obsessed. So I remember those days, getting ready for the sale, staffing the sale, and of course being part of just like the excitement during Black Friday. It was amazing, lineups. And then fast forward as a retail buyer for 20 years, buying for those promotional events like Black Friday, very, very stressful. Also exciting because many of us would work in the store from the corporate office. And in some cases, I worked all over the world. It was very different in the UK working Black Friday because it wasn't really a thing at that time. And then, of course, my stores across Europe, not really a thing. But then because my global merchandising team was in the US, we still had to buy for these promotional events, even though they didn't really apply to us. And then the third phase is as a consumer. I remember this really, really well in 2010 in San Francisco, Union Square, going to Saks. It was so exciting. This is like the heyday of San Francisco shopping. It was like the best, right? We had the Armani Cafe. You had like so many things. But at Saks, in the shoe department, there was a full-on fight. And I remember this so clearly. And it was something I'd never experienced before, but I'd always read about, more from like Walmart, people buying TVs and, fighting over technology, but never over designer shoes at Saks. So that was something that really stuck to my mind.
That's great. And, you brought up the UK. They have Boxing Day. They don't have Black Friday.
Yeah.
But they have recently started having Black Friday because of everything else. And interesting, you brought up Saks. So Saks, the big hoo-ha on Saks is they didn't do their big light show. So I'm wondering, Mark, maybe are their sales going to be impacted by people not going there? That'll be interesting to see in terms of that. And the other thing I'll just mention is that, were we crazy back then thinking that we could actually staff and provide service and keep environments safe by pushing everybody into the store on one day like that? Now looking back in reflection, I think, what were we crazy thinking that? I like that it's spread out now because it's easier to manage. But Mark, I know you've written a lot about this and you call Black Friday kind of the disease. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, look, promotional retailers, all retailers, but particularly promotional retailers, suffer from a condition best described as the need to make the day. So you create a very successful day, whether it's Black Friday or some other event or just an ordinary day. And a year later, you have to make the day. You have to make those numbers, if not beat them, to satisfy a plan. So creating this overlarge, over-the-top promotion, which was, I've got to tell you, extraordinarily effective back in the day. It not only drove a lot of volume for the day, it created a ladder of promotional pricing leading up to the 25th and then past the 25th, which when practiced by people who knew what they were doing was a very successful way to make the day, drive the volume, and make money and protect your gross margin. And of course, satisfy customers so that a year later they'd come back. So this was an extraordinarily successful strategy, but of course it began to become, like many things that are too good to be true, something of a disease. And the disease is the disease of high-low pricing. So what happened was, what started out as an 8 a.m. open door for doorbusters became a 7 a.m. and then a 6 a.m. and then a 5 a.m. There was an arms race as to who would open earlier because they would get the early morning crowd. And then, of course, some people got really smart, so they opened up at midnight. And then, of course, they opened up the day before on the holiday itself. And then over a period of years, many of the participants in this three-ring circus started to screw around with the calendar and use the Black Friday headline to signal promotions a week in advance of Thanksgiving. And now, as you probably know, it's a overused headline that first appears at the beginning of October. When I wrote for Forbes some years ago about Black Friday, the disease, and then Black Friday, cure. I speculated that we'd start to see Black Friday headlines at Labor Day in September. And I'm not quite sure I've seen that, but we see Black Friday like pricing, 40 and 50 off, for example, as early as Labor Day. And so the disease is when the calendar gets purloined and pricing loses its legitimacy. And so now that's the bind that so many retailers, particularly high-low retailers, have found themselves in, if in fact they still exist. Mervyn's is gone.
Oh.
Goodies is gone. Kohl's is desperately trying to regain its mojo, which now has a new CEO. Good luck, but I don't know that's possible. JCPenney is being propped up by a landlord, and it's not gone, but it was a victim of this disease. And of course, so is Macy's. And I would say Target is struggling with this as well. It used to be an absolute call to action. It still is. It drives a lot of traffic. It drives a lot of footsteps. But it was the basis of a successful promotional strategy. And now it's just another headline.
Yeah, and I've actually seen Black Friday in July. So I know there was a period of time where Amazon was talking about they would run their Prime Day, and then the other retailers would call it Black Friday in July. But Lisa, it's very difficult from a merchant perspective. Like nowadays, what are we doing with trying to get holiday sales in and sell things at regular price as opposed to the deep discounting that goes on?
I think we're seeing a lot of things in terms of assortment planning and planning for markdown activity. The challenge that I think a lot of retailers face is that they're still planning a year or more in advance. And because they're doing that, they're still planning for these promotional items. Like as a buyer, I would buy more quantities of I would call them like margin drivers. So where I know I would make up the margin, even if I was going to discount them, I would plan for these promotional events and drop those type of products on the floor at that time. The challenge that a lot of brands and retailers are having today is, number one, they don't know what their customer wants. So they are thinking more supply equals more demand. So let's just throw product at the customer, see what happens. We're also starting to see the promotional events like Black Friday a lot longer. And they're starting earlier and earlier. So now we're buying into these promotional events. We're planning for them with a lot more product to be discounted. And of course, that's going to erode your margin by at the end of the year. We're also seeing a lot more activity around online and e-commerce players like Shein, like Temu, like Amazon
Yes.
Haul, right? All of these tech companies, let's call them, are impacting the way that brands and retailers are buying, not only full price buyers, but also brands like TJX. And we're seeing a lot more activity because we're looking at a deal-driven consumer. And I know we're going to talk about that a bit later. But I think in terms of planning for promotional events, we're just seeing a lot more goods on the shop floor, a lot more than we've ever seen, and a lot more discounts. Whether they're deep discounts or not, there are a lot of discounts.
Well, I want to go back to something Mark said. You talked about how back in the day we would curate products specifically for Black Friday. And what I see now, sans the great beauty gift packs that always come out. I always look forward to the beauty gift packs because they do such a great job. Mark, are you seeing I'm just not seeing these great products that are curated for holiday?
Well, what we're seeing is a default, which is deadly, which is the all on sale or the entire stock, which is an indiscriminate way of discounting, which doesn't provide any differentiation whatsoever except for the discount amount. And so this is when an organization throws its hands up and says, we can't engage in the age-old process of selecting things that customers are going to want to seek you out for. The move to e-commerce, the depth of discounting, all of that notwithstanding, The most successful retailers, the most profitable retailers, focus primarily on the product they carry, the product they have to sell. So, interestingly enough, one of the most heavily trafficked stores today, the Friday after Thanksgiving, is typically the Apple store. And there's
Yep.
almost nothing in the Apple store that's on sale. Okay. Now they are a unique retailer in terms of what they represent and the limited breadth of assortment that they carry. But at the end of the day, the focus on product has been dissipated to the point where too many retailers are just using this, it's all on sale. Take 50 off everything. Maybe there's some mouse type at the bottom that says exclusions apply, but in most cases there are no exclusions. So I think first and foremost, for retail to be healthy, whether it's Shein style, Hall style, or Neiman Marcus Saks, it's got to revert back to having things that customers are really going to want to have. And that used to be the watchword of, I don't want to sound overly sentimental here, but selecting the Black Friday doorbusters was a year-long effort, which started out with what incredible things can we come up with? And then where do we find them? And how do we get sufficient quantities? And then how do we figure out how to, from a financial and operational point of view, pull it off? Too much of that is gone, unfortunately.
Well, let's talk about, Lisa, I'm going to start with you on this one. Where's the consumer mindset, today about Black Friday? Like, what are they thinking? Where do you think they're at?
I think that the consumer is fickle. The consumer has a lot more choice than they've ever had. And they're using, and this is quite fascinating to me, is that they're using apps that are fueled by AI to determine, okay, what is their shopping list going to look like? There's a lot more planning that's involved. We're not going to the same stores that we used to go to. And I think that with all the planning, because there's so much choice, I think that consumers are very deliberate about where they're going to shop and what they're going to buy. And not only are they planning for themselves, of course, there's a lot of gift giving. Now, I have a few stats that I thought would be interesting to share. Outside of what NRF is saying, which is, they're thinking that we are going to have a great season, right? We're going to be
3.5%, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I thought was interesting is that 183.4 million people are planning to shop in-store and online from Thanksgiving Day to Cyber Monday this year. The other thing that I thought was really interesting, and this was something I saw the other day, was how many people are planning to shop. So AAA projected that 80 million travelers will head 50 miles or more outside of their home over the Thanksgiving holiday travel period. So not only are we going to see an increase in travel, hospitality, but we're also going to see a lot more people shopping this year in store, which is very exciting from a retailer's perspective and how they're going to engage that customer in a great shopping journey. So of course, we're going to have more deals because we know that's what the customer wants, but they're also expecting better customer service. So I think there's going to be a very interesting, there's interesting variables at play this year, more so than ever, because it's almost like the customer is in charge. That's how I feel.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think when you talk about this planning thing, what then becomes really important from a retailer perspective is, so consumers they're planning out, they're saying, what can I buy online? What stores do I don't have to go to that I can just get stuff, have it sent to my house? I don't want to deal with going to that store versus, I love going to this environment or that environment. I want to visit this store. That's my favorite retailer. So it just kind of solidifies the idea that experiential retail and creating environments that customers like to shop in, that's really important now.
It is. And I think because that spending philosophy has changed and the consumer is more deal driven, they're expecting the retailer not only to fulfill the deals and the discounts and the promotions, but also fill that other bucket of, we want a great experience at the same time. Now, I don't know if you've seen what's happening in the mall today, but it's actually not very busy. I don't know if you've seen, I've been looking at, all the folks that are in store and the sales associates I know and what they're posting, but it's not as busy as we thought it would be, because we have hybrid shopping in place, right? We're
Right.
shopping both online and of course in store, but the expectations on the in-store experience are still there.
Right. And Mark, I know you'll have an opinion on this, because I know you're in the same agreement that, this heavy discounting is only a race to the bottom. That's Robin Lewis used to say that all the time. But now we have what's called a holiday guaranteed price. So if that item, if you get it in October and it goes on sale through, I believe a lot of stores carry it through post Christmas, you will get a refund, or you'll get an adjustment if it goes lower. Now, it has to be the exact same price, exact SKU. Mark, is that just, at one hand, you're getting the shopper to commit early to buy it because they know they have the guaranteed price. But on the other hand, you're kind of, saying that you're going to give a lot of markdown dollars away through the holiday.
Well, let me say a few things. First of all, NRF has said 2.5% to 4% every year for time immemorial. Okay.
That's true.
The second thing I'll say is that this is a short holiday season.
Yeah.
This is when the calendar compresses, which creates a crisis if there's any kind of weather or other disruption anywhere in the country. The third thing I'll say is that the footsteps, the traffic on the Friday after Thanksgiving has been diminishing for years. Take the COVID crisis off the table. Traffic was declining pre-COVID, and I think it's going to be disappointing again today, because most of the Black Friday specials are just in the normal course. The customer knows if they see something they like, they'll find it next week and the week after. And if they wait until the very end, they'll get it even cheaper. Now, to your point about this guaranteed price, various retailers over the years have offered this price guarantee. Almost none of them. In fact, I only know of one retailer who actually practiced the promise that they made. Years and years ago, I bought a big screen TV from a now defunct electronics retailer in Boston, probably in the middle of November. And sometime in January, I got a check in the mail from them honoring the promise they had made that I didn't even know they had made. Okay. The fact is that most retailers require the customer to come in and play the now see here. I paid $100 and now it's $75. So I want an adjustment. And now you have to produce proof. And most customers will not put up with that. They'll just be pissed off that they bought something at a higher price that they've now seen has been discounted further. The problem is this is cognitive dissonance of the first order. This is customers making decisions that in the back of their mind they know might not be wonderful decisions, but they've got a shopping list. Now, Lisa mentioned something about service. Customer service in most retailers today is terrible. It was never wonderful for many retailers, but there was some attempt, some modicum to boost the customer company interaction and make it a positive experience. That's gone by the boards in many retailers. And some who have suffered from a tremendous lapse, like Walmart, have started to get their act together. They're fully staffing their stores. They're keeping their shelves full. Target, which has gone through this up and down period over the years, is now struggling with disheveled stores and customers who get treated or greeted as guests if in fact they encounter somebody, but that's less and less likely to happen these days. I'm painting this with a broad brush. The antidote to being pissed off as a physical shopper is to go online and do business with someone you know is reliable enough to show you something they will actually ship you as you have selected and deliver it when they promise. And so, even though it's anybody's guess what the e-commerce brick and mortar shift will be this holiday, my prediction is e-commerce will continue to grow, even with a shortened holiday window on the calendar. And the fact that Lisa is mentioning that the traffic in malls is not robust is going to become endemic for the next few days, because customers know if they wait, they benefit. And what can I tell you? That, by the way, there is a foot race now going on in many retailers' organizations to sell off the inventory they've got committed on their balance sheet.
Absolutely.
So they're looking at their sell-throughs, their weeks of supply. They've got 17 days plus whatever they account for in the post-Christmas promotional window before spring goods start arriving and their open to buy crisis begins for 2025. So now the discounting becomes heroic based on a need to sell off what it is we own. And for retailers who have assorted their inventories carefully, they'll be fine. For retailers who haven't, they're going to get crushed.
Good point, Mark. Let's do a quick, fun boom or bust on a few hot topics. And I have to start with something Lisa mentioned earlier, which is Amazon haul. So Lisa, Mark, we'll start with Lisa. Boom or bust on Amazon haul?
I would say boom.
Boom.
Mark?
Boom.
I say boom too. I wish they would have rolled it out. I think it would have been better if they rolled it out with Prime Day earlier, because then you have the customer trained. I think there's a lot of customers out there that kind of missed the Amazon haul app, promotion. So I think it would have been more of a boom, but I do think it's a boom. What about Black Friday in July? Mark, boom or bust?
Oh, that's crazy. That's a complete non-starter.
I agree, it's bust. And I say that also from like my merchant mind, right? I'm like, that is a horrendous idea because nobody is shopping in July. Let's be real. That's excess inventory. That's what we're selling off.
How about Black Friday in October? Oh.
Look, Black Friday connotes a day on the calendar, not a month of days, not a season of days. It's just a further manifestation of the disease that surrounds many retailers. Go back to Amazon haul for a second, if I may. I think the reason why Amazon has taken its time is because Amazon has a logistics issue it has to be able to solve.
Right.
And so creating an enormous well of demand that they're not prepared to satisfy in the manner in which they typically satisfy customers' demand would be a real crisis for them. So I don't know this, but I suspect in the halls of Amazon, the conversation centers around, when we do something like this, we've got to do it well, we've got to do it right, we've got to avoid disappointing and pissing off customers because we become overwhelmed with business that we weren't anticipating.
I think what's interesting there is the strike and how that's going to impact Amazon haul, and where is that product actually coming from? Is it aligned with Prime? Is it aligned with those delivery expectations? I don't think so. It's price driven, right? There's something else that I wanted to mention, and I don't know if you read the Wall Street Journal this morning, but there's a headline, "Buy now before tariffs hit." This is what retailers are telling
That's
shoppers.
right.
So not only are we creating Black Friday FOMO, right? This fear of missing out if we don't buy on this day or on Cyber Monday, but now we have this, I would say, another marketing tool, really, but it's not only a marketing tool, it is really embedded in fear from the retailer's perspective, but they're pushing that on the consumer. So I'm curious to hear what you think about, how are tariffs really going to impact not only the marketing of this promotional event that we're in, but what does it mean for the consumer for the future?
Right. And before you turn it over to Mark, Lisa, I want to ask you one question. Do you really think the consumer, the everyday consumer, not us, but the everyday consumer, do you think they really understand tariffs and what
I
they
don't think
do
they
and what they
understand
mean?
it. No, I don't think they understand it, but I do think that through marketing, through the retailer's own nervousness, they're going to transition that fear to the customer. The customer may not know what it's going to mean for them, but they're scared too.
Well, you know, customers have been hearing for 5 years that countries pay for the tariffs, which is a bald-faced lie. Tariffs are an idea that started in the 1930s that have existed inconsistently across marketplaces that have no bearing whatsoever on trade protection, unless production can be protected or brought back. Now, when you're talking about automotive tariffs, you're talking about one thing. When you're talking about sweaters, shirts, and blouses and dresses, you're talking about something else. We still have automotive production in the United States, which may be legitimately in need of protection. We don't have needle trades in the United States any longer,
Right.
and we never will ever again. No one is going to start sitting at sewing machines in the United States, and if they do, they'll have to be paid $100 an hour, and sweaters and shirts will cost 3 or 4 or 5 times what they cost now. So the problem that the world faces is, will these threats actually become put in place? Will China suddenly be forced into a plus 10, plus 20 tariff situation across the board? Will countries that are not being threatened suddenly become part of this? Will manufacturers that shift production from China to Vietnam have to deal with a Vietnamese tariff at some point?
Right.
Nobody knows what the hell to expect on January 20th. And at the end of the day, if these threats if these threats materialize, we are going to be in a world of hurt. And no amount of shopping in advance of January 20th is going to shield the consumer from the effects they're going to face at the store. No two ways about it. Because wherever tariffs are imposed, the price goes directly into the retail price, with very few exceptions.
Mm-hmm.
So madness is upon us. Maybe we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, but I think tying it back to Black Friday, I think it's gonna encourage customers to shop more now than closer to Christmas, is what I would say.
Interesting.
Well, they may buy an electronics product which they know is made in Asia, made in China, which is a big ticket purchase in the first place. But at the end of the day, let's just hope this is all bluff. As they would say, I used to live in Texas. It's all hat, no cattle, because it could create a rolling catastrophe just when we're shrugging off the after effects of COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll have to regroup at the end of January for that conversation, I think.
That's
Definitely.
right.
That's a whole nother podcast. But before we leave, do you guys have any last minute quick things you'd like to say before we close out? I know we ran a little bit over, but it was so much fun having you both here. Any last minute thoughts?
I'm excited to go shopping as a consumer. I'm not going to lie. I'm shopping online and offline as a consumer. And I think that with more choices than ever, it's overwhelming, but I have my list. I'm ready to go. That's the first thing. But from a retailer's perspective, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens at the end of the season from a margin perspective. How much excess inventory are we sitting on? Because did we buy too much? Because we have so many promotions during Black Friday, and because our promotional time frame is so much longer than we've ever had. So for me, I'm excited and curious to see what happens.
Well, I think the 2024 winners who've been doing well all year are going to have a field day this holiday, and the laggards are going to get hammered, possibly to a far greater extent than they're revealing in their current forecasts. The consumer is going to shop. The holiday will come. Little Johnny and Mary are going to get a gift or gifts. And NRF will probably be correct in that their 2.5 to 3.5% forecast. But then the tail of the tape isn't really available until the end of January, and then it's all a play on gross margin.
Yeah.
That's all right, Mark. And even at the end of January, we won't know those results till May.
That's
you
true.
know, so that's the real tale. So thank you both so much for being here. It was awesome. Wishing everyone a great holiday, and enjoy the weekend and get out and shop.
Yes. Thanks, Shelley. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Bye-bye.